The moment the elevator doors opened, a palpable wave of tension washed over the glossy, glass-walled boardroom. Suits straightened, postures stiffened, and a collective breath was held. Marisa Thornwell, the formidable CEO of Thornwell Analytics, strode into the room. Her signature red blazer was a slash of color against the corporate monochrome, an emblem of the power and confidence she wore like armor. She was a force of nature, and everyone in her orbit knew it. Yet, as she took her place at the head of the table, all eyes subtly drifted past her, drawn to the quiet man who followed in her wake. He was older, with a crown of silver hair and a calm demeanor that seemed to absorb the room's anxious energy. A gentle, unassuming smile played on his lips, a stark contrast to the sharp, calculated expression surrounding him. This was Horace Benton. His attire was modest, his presence humble, a quiet island in a sea of ambition. He moved with a grace that spoke not of weakness, but of a deep, settled strength. As he approached Marisa, he extended his hand, a simple gesture of greeting. Marisa glanced down at it, a flicker of amusement in her eyes, before letting out a short, dismissive laugh. She folded her arms, a clear rejection, leaving Horace's hand hanging in the air for a beat too long. His smile dimmed, just slightly, but it never broke. What no one in that room could possibly comprehend, least of all Marisa, was the true nature of the man standing before them. Horace Benton wasn't defined by the cut of his suit or the price of his watch. For decades, he had been a silent force for good, a quiet investor not just in companies, but in people. He poured his resources and his faith into communities, championing individuals long after the world had written them off. He saw potential where others saw failure, and nurtured growth where others saw only barren ground. His wealth wasn't just in his bank account. It was in the lives he had touched and the futures he had helped build. Marisa, on the other hand, had constructed her empire on a foundation of dominance and ruthlessness. She was a brilliant strategist, a shark in a world of minnows. But her vision was narrow. She measured worth in profit margins and power plays. She could unsee the immense value in someone who didn't broadcast their influence through flashy attire or a commanding presence. To her, Horace was just an odd, quiet old man. She was completely oblivious to the fact that he was the very investor, the one lifeline, who possessed the power to save her teetering company from the brink of total collapse. She had dismissed her savior with a laugh. Later that same day, the world Marisa had so carefully constructed began to shatter. The first call came from a major client, pulling their account. Then another. And another. And another. The news hit the stock market like a tidal wave. Shares plummeted. The digital ticker in the lobby, once a source of pride, now flashed a relentless, bleeding red. Panic, once a foreign concept within the walls of Thornwell Analytics, began to spread like a virus. Whispers filled the hallways, and the confident faces of her top executives were now masks of fear and uncertainty. Marisa watched it all from her glass-enclosed office, a silent queen watching her kingdom crumble. Her first instinct was pride. It was the same pride that had made her dismiss Horace, the same pride that had fueled her every conquest. She wouldn't ask for help. She would fix this herself, just as she had always done. But this was different. This wasn't a competitor she could crush or a deal she could force. This was a crisis of confidence, a collapse of the very foundation she had built. The numbers didn't lie. Reality hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was sinking, and she was sinking fast. She needed Horace. It wasn't just his financial resources she needed anymore. It was something more. It was his wisdom, his stability, his guidance. The quiet man she had mocked was her only hope, swallowing the bitter pill of her own arrogance. Marisa began her search. It wasn't easy. Horace wasn't listed in any high-profile corporate directories. He didn't have a flashy office in a downtown skyscraper. Trembling, fueled by a desperation she had never known, she finally tracked him down. The address led her not to a mansion or a penthouse, but to a small, unassuming community art center in a forgotten corner of the city. The contrast was jarring. She stepped out of her luxury car onto a cracked pavement. A world away from the polished marble floors and gleaming glass walls she called home. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and alive. Children were painting freely on large canvases, their laughter echoing off the walls. A group of seniors sat in a circle, chatting and knitting, their faces filled with a genuine warmth and connection. The air smelled of paint and freshly brewed tea, not of expensive perfume and corporate anxiety. The calm, grounded energy of the place stunned her. It was a world built on connection, not competition. And there, in the middle of it all, was Horace. He was sitting with a young girl, patiently showing her how to mix colors, his face illuminated by a gentle, paternal smile. Marissa approached him, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt like an intruder, her red blazer a glaring symbol of a world that had no place here. The words caught in her throat. She, Marissa Thornwell, who had never apologized for anything in her life, began to speak. She apologized for her behavior, for her arrogance, for her blindness. Her voice, usually so commanding, was barely a whisper. She was braced for his anger, for rejection, for him to turn her away just as she had done to him. But Horace simply looked up, his eyes holding not a trace of triumph or resentment. Instead, she found only understanding. He didn't lecture her or gloat. He simply reminded her of a fundamental truth she had long forgotten. He spoke of respect, not as something to be demanded, but as something to be earned through action. He told her that true leadership wasn't about titles or money or power. It was about humanity. It was about seeing the person behind the position, the heart behind the resume. His words were simple, yet they cut through decades of her carefully constructed defenses. In that humble art center, surrounded by the quiet beauty of human connection, Marissa finally began to understand. Over the following weeks, Horace became her guide. He didn't just write a check. He invested his time. He advised her company, but more importantly, he mentored her team. He taught Marissa the forgotten arts of gentleness, of listening, of truly hearing what her employees had to say. He showed her how to value hearts over resumes, to see the potential in her people that she had been blind to. It was a slow, difficult process. Marissa had to unlearn a lifetime of aggressive habits. But slowly, miraculously, things began to change. The company culture, once toxic with fear and competition, began to heal. Employees, who once dreaded coming to work, started collaborating, innovating, and supporting one another. The panic subsided, replaced by a tentative but growing sense of hope. As the internal environment stabilized, the external world took notice. Old clients, hearing of the transformation, returned. New investors, drawn by the renewed sense of purpose and stability, came on board. The company didn't just survive, it began to thrive, but in a new, more sustainable way. Employees no longer feared Marissa, they admired her. They saw the incredible transformation of the woman who once ruled with an iron fist. By the end of this journey, Marissa Thornwell was a different person. She still wore her red blazer, but it no longer felt like armor. It was just a color. She realized that the greatest investment Horace had ever made wasn't financial. It was the belief he had placed in her when she was at her worst, when she least deserved it. He showed her that true strength doesn't come from pride or dominance. It comes from the difficult, courageous choice to choose grace over ego, kindness over cruelty. It comes from the humility to learn and the humanity to connect. If this story touched your heart or reminded you about the incredible power of kindness and second chances, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to World of Kindness for more stories that inspire and uplift. We'd love to hear from you, so please let us know in the comments which part of Marissa and Horace's story moved you the most. Thanks for watching.